Okay, guys, great to see you all here today, and I'm glad you could all make it to the Nutrition Advice for Runners webinar. Before I start, I just want to apologise in advance if there are any audio issues, as it's the first time I've used this platform, so it's a bit of an experiment. So I hope you can all hear me, and I hope it all goes well. Okay, so those of you that don't know me or don't know what I'm about, basically I'm a running specialist coach, and my aim is to educate runners on how to avoid mistakes and demoralizing setbacks in their training and their performance. Okay, so I run a blog on, or use my Facebook page as a blog. However, I do have a website on the go at the moment, which I'm working on. Okay, so the webinar tonight, I'm going to start off initially by just jumping straight in it, because I'm aware some of you might have time commitments. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to just give you some advice on the foods that you should try to eat and the foods that you should try to avoid. Okay, so the obvious ones are all the processed foods, because we hear about it in the press all the time. They don't contain much at all. They're quite kind of well, they're plain in terms of their nutritional content. So they're full of flavorings, preservatives, and it's just really not good to consume them. Okay, so along with the processed foods are obviously foods that are going to actually hold you back, because they could be hard to digest, or they're generally not a great source of nutrition, and they can cause a lot of intestinal issues or irritants. So I'm just going to go through a whole list of foods that I am going to advise to avoid. I'll explain later why, and obviously I'll also give you a list of foods that I also suggest you try and eat as much of as possible. Okay, so first off is sugar. Now, sugar is brilliant if you are consuming it straight after training or competition, because you need to get those energy stores back up. Okay, but any other time, you're not going to use the sugar that much, or the energy from the sugar, so it's not the greatest source of energy if you're just going about your day-to-day work or just before training, because you've already got the energy in your fat stores. Okay, so sugar we're going to try and avoid as much as possible. The next food item is dairy. Now, a lot of people have issues with dairy, and to a certain extent, because of the processing methods of dairy, unless you're buying organic or full fat, a lot of it's going to have a lot of trans fats in, because of the processes that involve thinning it. So I'm going to say or advise dairy is also. Cereals, they're also on the list. Now, porridge is great, so I'm gonna advise you to continue, or if you haven't already, start to have porridge in the morning. That goes the same with cereal bars, red and wheat. They all these areas contain a lot of sugars, well, particularly cereals. so they're not the greatest source of nutrition, although they are a kind of good fix in the morning. If you plan it better, then you can kick your day off with a good start. So, for example, the porridge, you're going to get slow release energy in that because they're full of complex carbs. So that is all good. Okay, we can move on to cooking oils now. Okay, so that includes sunflower oil and vegetable oil. Now, vegetable oil and sunflower oil, when you heat it up or fry with it in any way, because of the nature of it, it becomes denatured and turns into a trans fat. So trans fats are no good. I'm going to go into why a bit later, but for the time being, all you need to know is they are bad. Okay, and this goes kind of along with margarine. Now, margarines tend to be made from sunflower oil or various other oils which are normally liquid at room temperature. Now, the whole process they go to make them solid at room temperature, I believe it's called homogenization, that basically turns the whole block of margarine into a giant lump of trans fat. So again, these trans fats keep appearing. Alright, so just to recap then, we're going to try and avoid to have sugars unless it's immediately after workout, dairy, processed foods, breakfast cereal and bars, vegetable and sunflower oil, and margarine. Okay, so we're going to try and keep away from those foods. Also, I don't know whether I mentioned it, but bread and wheat are also ones we should try to avoid. Now, bread mostly because, well, particularly if it's white bread, it's used up very quickly. It's broken down very quickly. It's got quite a high GI. So again, we're closer to being a sugar, and if that energy is going to be broken down really quickly, then chances are, unless we are going to be using that energy quickly, it's pretty much wasted and it's going to be stored as fat. Okay, so they're the foods that we're going to try and avoid then. So, moving on to the foods that I advise you kind of stock up on, and that's all vegetables. Okay, vegetables are brilliant. They have lots of antioxidants, and the more you eat, the better. The more colourful ones, the better. Okay, they're just great. They're superfoods. Okay, and I'm sure you've heard a lot. Now, in that group also, particularly this is an issue for runners and it would benefit, is spinach. Now, spinach contains quite a lot of iron. Now, in the past I've experienced iron deficiencies in running, and it's more common than it's thought. As in, there's a lot of athletes that aren't even aware, maybe, that they have an iron deficiency. Now, I'm not going to in any way diagnose people, because that is not my profession at all. But I'm just going to kind of make that aware that if you have a sudden dip in performance, then it could be linked with that. Okay, so moving on. Free-range organic eggs, they're a good source of protein, as with all organic meats. Okay, so they're good sources of protein, and we need them for obviously recovery and building up our body following strenuous activity, i.e. training, competition. Okay, so they're going to help us grow and repair. Alright, so moving on, well, I'm going to also say something that's going to be a bit of a surprise here. Now, that's fresh fruit. Now, fresh fruit is great. Again, it's really good to have immediately after competition. But because of the high sugar content, we should probably try and eat more vegetables compared to fresh fruit, only because of the high sugar content. Okay. So, other sources of food that's good to eat is also nuts and seeds. They contain lots of proteins, and if you eat them combined, then you might be able to have a meal that contains complementary proteins. Again, I will move on to that later in the webinar. Now, oils. The oils I'm going to recommend you have in your cupboards is olive oil. Now, olive oil is great. Now, I'm not going to advise frying with it again. If you're going to fry with anything, ideally it should be butter, because it's quite an inert substance. It's not going to really change in any way other than kind of becoming more liquid. Okay, so butter is not going to turn into a trans fat if you start frying with it, whereas olive oil, although it has a higher kind of smoke point, or the point that it becomes denatured, compared to sunflower oil, still don't really want to be frying with it. But if you have to cook with an oil, then you could probably use it in baking or cooking or frying at a really low temperature. Okay. Alright then, so that is the food recommendations then. So, just to recap, the foods that I'm going to advise you to stock up on are vegetables, free-range eggs or organic eggs and meat, fish, fresh fruit, but not too much, berries, nuts, seeds, beans and pulses, olive oil, extra olive oil if you can, because, well, look out for cold pressed olive oil, extra virgin cold pressed olive oil, purely because of the processing technique. Now, if it's cold pressed, it means it hasn't been heated up. And I know I mentioned just a minute ago about when you heat up olive oil, it denatures. Now, one of the processes that can be used to extract oil from olives is by heating them. Okay, so again, just to recap, look out for cold pressed olive oil if you can. Okay then, so the main purpose why we should be kind of having these and avoiding these foods is basically because we want to be feeding our body with the best nutrition. Okay. Now, the main bulk of our nutrition or energy comes from macronutrients. Now, these are the nutrients that provide the body with the most energy, and that being protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Now, alcohol does come into that section as well, believe it or not, but alcohol obviously really isn't a component that we should be having on a regular basis, and particularly on race day, because, you know, it's not going to give us much benefit. Okay, so the macronutrients, protein, fats and carbohydrate. Now, as a competitive athlete, there's going to be a lot of demand on your body. Now, I know you may feel that, or you probably do, fill your body up with loads and loads of carbs. you're probably abusing the protein a bit. And you really don't want to do that, because the protein's what is essentially going to help us repair and adapt to the training that we do. Okay, so I am just going to give a kind of a rough estimate of the components ideally that we should be having. Okay, so in your diet, we should ideally be having, as a competitive athlete, 40% of your diet should be carbs, 30% protein, and 30% fat. So that's the advice I'm going to give. Okay. Now, the reason being, as I said just a minute ago, is the demand that you're putting on your body. Okay. All right. So we're going to look a bit closer at proteins now. Okay. So proteins are broken down into amino acids. Now, if you look on the internet, there's a lot of kind of conflicting information about amino acids, how many there are, but I'm going to just stick to there being the standard 20. Okay. Alright, so of these 20, there are 11 non-essential and 9 essential amino acids. Now, the non-essential ones are the ones that your body produces, it can synthesize in the body. Okay. Now, the remaining ones your body needs from food, it's sourced from food in order to be synthesized in the body. Okay. Now, not only is this important for repair, but believe it or not, proteins also can help with energy, particularly if you're doing a really big event, which is going to last a long time. Like a marathon or ultra distance event. Okay, that's going to happen on a very, very high endurance level. Okay, so back to the amino acids. Now, meats, fish, dairy products, poultry, fish, and quinoa, which is a grain, they all contain a complete set of amino acids. Okay, so they're complete proteins. So if you have a portion of meat, a portion of fish, eggs, dairy products, poultry, or quinoa, they're going to provide you with your complete proteins. Okay. Now, there's also foods that contain protein but are incomplete. Now, these are typically plant-based. So they're the grains, seeds, vegetables, and nuts that you consume in your diet. What's good about these, you can combine them to create, in effect, a complete protein meal. This is called complementary proteins. Okay, so if you have a whole list of incomplete proteins, jumble them up, take a few kind of food sources such as seeds and nuts, or vegetables and grain. Chances are, if you base a meal on these, say, 2 sources, then the chances are you will have a complete protein meal, complementary protein meal. Okay. All right then. So that's proteins covered. We're going to move on to fats now. Okay. Now, fats, they're important. They're the primary source of our energy. Our body is brilliant at storing it. Okay. And it's ultimately where most of our energy is going to come from in a race, or in training, or in every day-to-day activity. Okay. Now, there are 4 types of fats. Okay. There's saturated fat, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and trans fats. Okay. Now, saturated fats, they get a bit of a bad press because they actually have quite a lot of benefits in the diet or to the body even. And it's surprising what they do. I mean, for example, they help protect vital organs. Saturated fats. They transport fat-soluble vitamins, and they're involved in cell membrane integrity. Okay, so they're quite important. Now, you're mostly going to get, or you're going to probably get enough of these saturated fats in your meats or any animal products, because animals they contain mostly saturated fat. Okay, so I'm going to go and say or advise that you shouldn't cut out saturated fat out of your diet or too much of it, because it does have a lot of benefits. Okay, but at the same time, we don't want to go crazy on them. Alright, so eat them moderately. Okay. Alright then, so monounsaturated fats. These actually reduce the LDL responsible for transporting fats. So they reduce low density lipoproteins. Okay. Low density lipoproteins are involved in the transport of fats in the body. Okay. They're typically known as kind of the bad cholesterol. Okay. Now, again, if they're carrying something bad around the body, then considered bad, again, it's something that's kind of been hyped up as being bad. Now, they transport fats around the body. Now, these fats, again, aren't necessarily dangerous, because these fats could be saturated fats that they're transporting, or other types of fats that we consume. Okay, so they're not necessarily bad. So, again, we don't want to we don't want to increase this too much or reduce it too much. So, again, a moderate amount of monounsaturates is good. Probably more so than saturates. Okay. Okay. So we then have polyunsaturated fats. Now, these are also known as the essential fatty acids, and the essential fatty acids being omega-3 and 6. Now, these are really important, and they're involved in the formation of hormones. They have anti-inflammatory properties, and they also help support the immune system. Okay, so they're good fats. All right. Well, I'm not going to say good fats, because all fats, other than the next one I'm coming on to, are good fats. Okay. So the last of these fats is trans fats. Now, these are the true bad boys. Okay. These are the real bad ones. Now, they cause a lot of kind of destruction in effect in the body. Now, they can cause impairment of cellular functions, and they're typically dumped onto arterial walls. So it's believed they could be linked to kind of the build-up of plaque in the arteries. Okay, because these are known to, or believed to be known to be dumped onto artery walls. Okay. Now, the trans fats typically come from foods that have gone through hydrogenation processes or other processes, or particularly just processed foods in general, where they've had various things happen to them, or in manufacturing processes to kind of extend their shelf life. Okay, so again, we want to avoid trans fats at all costs. Okay. Okay, so carbohydrates. Now, these will provide you with energy in addition to fats. Okay, but it's the type of carbohydrate that matters here. Okay. Now, there's two types of carbohydrate. You have simple and you have complex. Now, the simple carbohydrates are your sugars and refined complex carbohydrate. Okay. So these are your sweet soft drinks, although it can occur naturally in fruit. There's a lot of sugar, natural sugars in fruit. Okay, so these again are typically found in processed foods or refined foods, other than natural fruit. Okay, and then moving on to complex carbohydrates. These are the starches, the starchy foods. Okay, so this is the pasta, this is the bread. I'll correct myself, whole meal bread. Okay, white bread is actually quite high in sugars because it's a refined complex carbohydrate. Okay, so it's kind of similar to sugars in that your body uses, or it breaks down really quick. It's got a high GI. Okay. Alright then guys, so that is protein, fats and carbohydrates covered. Okay. Now I'm gonna save this or upload it onto my YouTube channel once we're finished. So hopefully any of you that want to kind of come back and listen to the video again, or listen to the audio again, or kind of want to reference it for your own benefit, then that is excellent. Okay. So again, I'm going to upload it for everyone to kind of use and see, and I'm hoping that you'll find something in there that you can use in your nutrition. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for coming and watching the webinar tonight. It's been great to see you all turn out. Okay. If you need any help or advice with your training or nutrition needs, then feel free to contact me or follow me on Facebook, follow me on YouTube. Okay, I'm on a number of social media platforms. Okay. Alright then guys, have a good evening. Keep up the training, and I'll hopefully hear from you again soon.